All right, so today let's dive into humanoid robots.
Okay.
You know, the kind of robots that walk and talk like they're straight out of science fiction. Are they going to be like everywhere, like smartphones, or is that just like Silicon Valley hype, you know?
Right, yeah.
To figure this out, we've got a report from this French industry magazine, L'usine Nouvelle. It's all about this big robotics conference, Humanoids 2024.
Uh,
We've also got some YouTube videos showing off like the cutting edge of AI in robotics these days.
What's really interesting is the contrast we're seeing. You've got companies like Tesla talking about a world full of robot helpers, but then you've got the researchers at this conference. They're trying to figure out how to make these robots actually work in the real world,
Yeah,
which honestly is a lot messier than a controlled demo.
totally. It's like two different realities trying to like become one.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to explore both sides of this whole thing, the hype and then what's actually happening on the ground. Are we really on the edge of a robot revolution or is it more complicated than that?
I think it's definitely more complicated. But the Humanoids 2024 conference seems like a good place to start.
Yeah, for sure. This conference was huge. L'usine Nouvelle said it had record attendance, way more than usual.
Hmm.
And it wasn't just academics there. There were a ton of people from industry, too.
That's interesting. Why do you think there is such a surge in interest from businesses? What's making them so focused on humanoid robots right now?
Well, the report pointed out a couple things. First, building robots is getting cheaper, so they're becoming more affordable to make. And second, AI is getting so much better. Robots can do way more than they could just a few years ago.
That makes sense. Cheaper and more capable robots. Of course, businesses are going to be interested. But there was something, or rather, someone missing from this conference.
You mean like the big American robotics companies?
Exactly. Tesla, Figure, Boston Dynamics, they weren't there.
Hmm.
They're generating all this hype in the media, but they're not actually showing their robots to the scientific community. Makes you wonder, you know?
Yeah, it's weird. Like, what are they really doing? How much progress have they actually made?
Right.
It's like they're playing their cards close to the chest. Maybe they don't want to give away their secrets to the competition. But it does make you question how far along their technology really is.
Speaking of competition in the future, we found a YouTube video where Elon Musk predicts there will be billions of humanoid robots by 2040.
Billions.
Pretty bold statement, don't you think?
Billions. It's like he's saying there'll be a robot for every person on Earth. Sounds like a sci-fi movie.
It does, doesn't it? But then if you listen to the researchers at the Humanoids conference, their perspective is, well, much more realistic. They know AI has potential, but they also emphasize how hard it is to create robots that can actually interact with humans in, complicated real-life situations.
I think the researchers have a point. We watched another YouTube video that talked about how these robots rely so much on large language models. And apparently, those models use a ton of energy. Plus, they're not that good at handling those basic physical tasks, the stuff you need for movement.
Yeah, that's important. Imagine a robot trying to get around a cluttered kitchen or help an elderly person. That requires a level of dexterity and adaptability that we're still figuring out how to program. Large language models can write text and translate languages, but they haven't mastered, folding laundry or holding something with a steady hand.
Exactly. So, L'usine Nouvelle also brought up this other interesting idea, open source robotics. There's this French research institute in Kirdaria. They're really pushing for this approach.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
How is that different from what other companies are doing?
Well, it's different from, like, Google's OpenX embodiment project. That project relies on these massive data sets. But with open source, the idea is that researchers can share what they learn and build on each other's work,
Right.
instead of everyone starting from scratch every time.
Oh, I see.
So it could lead to robots that are more efficient, more adaptable, and maybe even cheaper for smaller research teams,
Makes sense.
because they wouldn't need the same resources
Yeah.
as a huge company like Google.
Yeah, that's a really important point. It could change the whole landscape of robotics research.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the difference between having a set of shared blueprints for a robot versus everyone trying to figure it out on their own.
Exactly. And that brings us to the bigger picture, the global landscape of robotics. We all know the US and China are dominating the market right now. So where does Europe fit in?
Well, L'usine Nouvelle talked about how Europe is facing some serious challenges. They need to invest way more in research and development if they want to keep up with the US and China.
It's a tough spot to be in.
It is.
Like David versus Goliath?
Yeah, kind of.
But remember, David had his slingshot.
True.
The US and China may have size and resources, but Europe has a history of innovation and technical expertise. There are some really promising European startups out there, and if they can build a strong robotics ecosystem, they could have a big impact on the future of this technology.
Yeah, for sure. It's exciting to think about. The whole field of robotics feels so dynamic. It's like anything is possible.
I know, right? And it raises so many important questions, too.
Like what? What really stood out to you from all of this? What are the implications of a future filled with humanoid robots?
Well, that's a huge question. What are your initial thoughts?
Honestly, for me, it's the ethical stuff. Like, how do we make sure these robots are used responsibly? And what's going to happen to jobs and the economy?
Those are definitely crucial things to think about. It's a really complex situation. And it seems like there are multiple paths forward for developing this technology.
You mean like open source versus closed systems right now?
Exactly. It's a big decision.
It is.
Will the future of robotics be controlled by giant corporations with their own proprietary systems, or will it be driven by a more collaborative, open source approach?
Right.
Each path has its own pros and cons, which I think we should explore more deeply,
Yeah, definitely.
but we'll save that for next time.
Okay, sounds good.
For now, let's take a break,
Right.
and we'll come back and delve into those different approaches in more detail.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
All right, see you in a bit.
Sounds good.
So let's dig into those approaches a little more. Open source versus closed systems. What are the pluses and minuses of each? It's kind of like we're choosing our own adventure, right?
Yeah.
The future of robots.
Yeah, it really is. So with those closed systems, like what Google seems to be building, they've got this advantage. They can use like a ton of resources and data to make advancements really quickly. They might be the ones who solve the really tough problems first. But the problem is, all that progress and knowledge gets locked away behind all these walls of intellectual property,
Right.
and it makes it way harder for other researchers to get access to it and to build on it.
So it's like they have this secret recipe.
Yeah.
Right. But it could help everyone if they shared it.
That's a great way to put it. Now, with open source, like what Entreya is doing, you get that collaboration and everyone can see what's happening. Researchers share their findings, they build on each other's work, so you don't have to start from scratch all the time.
Right.
And this can lead to solutions that are, well, more robust and more diverse.
But there's got to be a downside, right?
Well, yeah, there are some potential drawbacks.
What are they?
One concern is that it might take longer to get those big headline-grabbing breakthroughs. Coordinating a huge open source project can be really tough, and it might not get the same level of funding as a for-profit company, backed by a tech giant.
Right. It's like the tortoise and the hare, isn't it? Slow and steady versus fast and flashy.
Yeah, exactly.
But the tortoise won in the end, didn't he?
Exactly. And in the long run, open source might actually lead to more sustainable and more impactful innovation in robotics.
Okay, so I'm starting to see the appeal of both sides. It's like choosing between a sleek, expensive sports car and a reliable, customizable off-road vehicle. They can both get you to your destination, but the trip and the overall experience are going to be totally different.
That's a perfect analogy, and it highlights the fact that there's not one right answer. The best approach really depends on what you're trying to do and what challenges you're facing.
So, am I getting this right? The future of humanoid robots is still totally up in the air. We're seeing all this progress in AI and robotics, but there are still these huge hurdles to overcome, technical hurdles and ethical ones too.
That's exactly it. And it's crucial that we're having these conversations now. While the technology is still being developed, we have to think carefully about what happens if humanoid robots become widespread. How will they affect workers, our relationships, even our sense of what it means to be human?
Yeah, those are big questions. And we can't ignore them. It seems like we have some important decisions to make about how we want to shape this robotic future. It's not something we can just leave to scientists and engineers.
I totally agree. This conversation needs to involve everyone.
Right.
The choices we make today, they're going to have a huge impact on the world we create for tomorrow.
Speaking of choices, there's one choice we want to encourage our listeners to make right now.
Oh, what's that?
To stick with us. For the final part of our deep dive into humanoid robots, we've talked about the hype, the reality of research, and some of the challenges ahead.
Right.
And in the next segment, we'll leave you with some final thoughts about what all of this means for the future of humanity.
Sounds good.
So stay tuned. Okay, so we're back, still diving deep into the world of humanoid robots. We've covered a lot, from that Humanoids 2024 conference to what Silicon Valley thinks. and what actual researchers are saying.
Yeah, we've been through a lot.
And we've talked about some pretty, like, philosophical questions about this whole AI-powered robot thing, the benefits, the risks, the ethics.
Right, all the big stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely given us a lot to think about. And I think it's easy to get caught up in the excitement or the fear, around these humanoid robots.
Definitely.
But we need to remember that we as humans have a say in all of this and how this technology is developed and how it's used.
I agree.
It's not like some preordained fate.
It's not set in stone.
Exactly.
We have choices to make, and those choices start with understanding where the technology is right now, what it can do, what it can't do, and what it might be able to do in the future.
Right.
We need to be informed and think critically about it all.
Not just blindly accept whatever new robot comes along.
Exactly.
So let's say I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, this is all super interesting, but what can I actually do to shape this robotic future?
That's a great question.
What actions can I take?
Well, first of all, just stay informed.
Okay.
Read articles, watch documentaries, have conversations like this one.
Right.
The more you know, the better equipped you are to make informed decisions about this technology.
So knowledge is power.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to ask questions.
Okay.
Question the claims companies are making. Question the assumptions behind this whole thing. How might it affect you, your community, the world?
Like that saying, the only stupid question is the one you don't ask.
Exactly. And finally, remember that you have a voice.
Okay.
Share your thoughts, your concerns, your hopes for the future. Talk to policymakers, researchers, your friends, your family.
Right.
This needs to be a conversation that we're all having.
It's about shaping the future we want, not just accepting whatever we get.
That's exactly it. And remember, the future of humanoid robots isn't just about the robots themselves. It's about what kind of world we want to live in.
Right.
Do we want a world where robots make our lives better, or one where they replace us? A world of collaboration or competition?
Those are some really big choices with some big potential consequences. I gotta admit, I'm kind of excited, but also a little nervous to see what happens.
I think we all feel that way.
Yeah,
But one thing's for sure, it's going to be fascinating.
it is. And that's a great place to wrap things up, I think. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of humanoid robots. We hope you learned something new and maybe even started thinking differently about the future.
Yeah, that's what we hope for.
So until next time,
Thanks.
keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep imagining.